The Wizard class in Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, the upcoming MMORPG by Visionary Realms, is leveling up. In the February producer's letter, Adam Tehom Mostel, production manager for Visionary Realms, shared the latest on how the Wizard is taking shape and where the class is currently in its design. And there's been some pretty significant changes. I've been fortunate enough to have had the opportunity to play the class last year on stream, which you can check out here. I'll be referencing that video throughout this one, so it might be worth a watch if you haven't already. So bringing that perspective to the table, it's time to ask, what's up with the Wizard? Let's start with what the official website says about the Wizard class in Pantheon. Their group role is damage dealing, and their combat resources are mana and focus. The guiding philosophy for the class, as noted in the recent newsletter, is when it comes to the sheer amount of damage dealt in a singular moment, or being able to burst down an enemy's health at the cost of sustained damage, Wizards will be the undisputed masters. Keep this in mind throughout this discussion. Going back to the website, which hasn't been updated yet to reflect the changes described in the newsletter, we look at the spells they have, and the pattern is clear. The longer you stayed within a damage type, the bigger your damage, spell haste, and critical chance became. You built focus every time you consecutively cast a type of spell, and then lost that focus when you switched. And this was consistent across all spell lines: fire, cold, and arcane. When I got to delve into Fortress Devair last year, some of the feedback I gave on that experience was that there wasn't much reason to ever deviate from a certain casting pattern most of the time. Bigger damage, spell haste, and crit chance all were more than worth the trade-off of slightly increased mana cost. In fact, the slight cost was easily offset completely by either a quick switch into the arcane spells which granted mana regen during combat, or ending combat with arcane spells to hasten mana regen for the next fight. The bottom line being that there was clearly a superior method and not much real choice involved. Tehom commented on this in the newsletter, stating, "While the Wizard was capable of delivering big numbers, its ability to do so was beholden to a build-spend dynamic that felt very rotational in play. But in February, we learned that this design has evolved into a more sophisticated system that moves beyond that mechanic." Here's what Tehom said on the matter. "We've also done away with the build-spend mechanics, and converted focus into a tool that rewards mana efficiency for staying within given damage type, while also awarding bonus damage for weaving. The intent is to create a more dynamic playstyle for the Wizard, where their decisions about how and when to use their biggest spells is more about an assessment of their current resources versus the needs of the fight, and they are free to burn or conserve their mana as suits the situation, rather than anything imposed by a game system." So it sounds like focus, as a resource, has really changed. While still being an entity within the Wizard's control, we, the player, may not be able to discharge it at will any longer. It is confirmed that damage is no longer served through increased focus, so we know that much. Furthermore, later in the newsletter, Tehom added, "Focus provides Wizards the tool to mitigate that cost when speaking about how mana-intensive Wizard spells are. It will be very interesting to see focus demonstrated in the future, so further assessments can be made on this front." When it comes to different spell types, that being fire, cold, and arcane, in my experience again, and what you'll see throughout my gameplay video, is that fire spells were king. I wanted the higher burn damage almost always, as opposed to the slowing effects of the cold spells. While the nature of our environment played into this, being in close quarters rather than an open field with the risk of the mob running away, there was still really no contest here. Tehom affirmed that previously, both fire and ice spells that mirrored each other in form and function, with the only major difference between them being their secondary effects, which compounded into either stronger damage or stronger control, respectively. So spells have become differentiated in their evolved design, and Tehom comments on this, noting, "One of the biggest changes to the Wizard is revamping their spells to make each line its own distinct and powerful choice." We'll likely have to wait for the website to be updated to reflect how they are now different, as it wasn't detailed in the newsletter. But it may be somewhat familiar, as Tehom commented, the Wizard's initial kit consists of 3 direct damage spells for each one of their core damage types, as well as a utility spell that allows the wizard to sacrifice some of their mana pool in exchange for greater defenses. This last line stands out to me. One of the spells I detailed in my video was Mana Skin, a spell that increased AC and health. It had a one-time cost, and I described it as being an automatic cast with no ongoing maintenance. Could this be that spell, but now with a cost attached? That would make a lot of sense, but again, we'll have to wait and see. The X factor in this that I haven't mentioned yet is the removal of critical spell hits that Visionary Realms announced last month. Here's what they said.
This is for all our casters out there. We are removing critical hit chance from offensive spells as one of the many updates that are coming into combat. There are going to be other ways to achieve big numbers, but crits as an RNG component make it really difficult to create spells that feel punchy in their own right. You typically see critical chance on spells, when you're looking at a higher APM, actions per minute MMO, because the potential damage of those crits gets spread out across many constant casts. But we're looking to make casting more deliberate, and we're looking to make casting more costly. And so what that means is that if spells can crit, they can be devastatingly overpowered if they do crit. Or on the other side of that, if you don't get a crit, it can feel way too punishing if you spent a lot of mana for very little gain. So our goal is to make those offensive spells feel really uniquely powerful for their cost in their own right. And then maximizing the potential of those spells is now going to be more a matter of navigating skills and resistances rather than navigating just RNG. And we think that's going to help differentiate how playing a caster feels compared to playing a melee.
As noted, crit chance was previously one of the variables that was served by building focus in a spell line. In fact, it was a fairly massive factor in not only focus, but also in the mastery upgrades I detailed in my video. A lot of the wizard's spells became much more likely to crit, or even guaranteed to crit, with some mastery upgrades. When VR has talked about the rationale for removing spell critical hits, it's been explained as wanting to emphasize choice over chance. Designing the arcane master with devastation at their fingertips, over the machine gun mage fishing for crits with spell volume, if you will. So with this in mind, and with no increased crit chance as part of the focus benefits as detailed in the newsletter, the calculation about whether to weave or build focus became even more intricate. With greater control comes greater choice. When my gameplay was featured, I received some critique on my wizardly tactics that I wasn't maximizing my damage at all times. My response was that I was managing my mana pool to facilitate expedient progress for the group. In the February newsletter, Theholm talks about this, as well as threat mitigation. He noted, wizard spells are also very, very threatening, and in a group setting, attempting to start a fight out of the gate with the biggest spells could end poorly for the wizard. Understanding what spells to leverage, and when, not only to achieve desired outcomes, but also to minimize downtime and risk, will be the hallmark of a great wizard versus a mediocre one. So take that, Peanut Gallery. I'm just kidding, of course, but the takeaway here is that there is a nuance to the wizard class that is evolving with their toolkit. Lastly, Theholm teased us with a couple of things that were not part of the wizard class when I played it, but after hearing it, I surely wish it had been. The first one was that wizards can look forward to at least one new ability that takes advantage of the charged ability mechanic that was introduced from monks. You'll remember the monk's charged ability was called Blazing Hand Punch, and that caused knockdown at full charge. This generated a lot of buzz in the community when seeing this one demonstrated, so I think leveraging this is incredibly smart. Will we be gathering an ice comet in our hands, or maybe building a radiating arcane aura from within? I think it's safe to say this one's going to be epic. Lastly, I would have loved to set some magical traps throughout Fortress Devair. Imagining Minus, Nathan Napalm, or Basgrim falling prey to my unseen arcane pits or fire sprays would have brought me a lot of joy. Alas, I didn't have that ability for our demonstration. But fear not, as Theholm shared, as for the things yet to come, we have our sights on giving wizards access to their own version of traps. And since I love seeing our community unravel the various bean drops, that's all I'll say on the matter, for now. So heads up, future testing friends, I have a little surprise for you. What did you think of the wizard update in the newsletter? Do you like the changes, or do you feel there's still room for improvement? Let me know in the comments. If I can ask that you subscribe to the channel, it really helps us here at Pantheon Plus have opportunities to participate in things like demonstrating a class like the Wizard, which I was given and I will be eternally grateful for. I love doing class analysis like this, so look for more as Pantheon continues along its development road. And as always, Cheers, and thanks for watching.